So I'm here in front of Disney's Wilderness Lodge, and there's something interesting inside the lodge that I wanted to share with you. It's a historical artifact that's of significance to Walt Disney himself. It was personal to him. In fact, it was at his home. So I want to show you what that artifact is, show you what's going on here, and show you where you can find it, because I think it's really kind of interesting. Now, the item we seek is really not here in the lobby. It's actually over in the villas. So we're going to take a walk over to the villas and have a look. But as long as I'm here, I just wanted to point out to you, this lodge really is pretty interesting. It's got a very Pacific Northwest feel to it. There are a lot of hidden Mickeys around here, and they actually will give out a guide if you ask at the desk, because there's so many of them in the hotel itself. So it's kind of an interesting hotel in its own way, so I wanted to point that out. But let's head over to the Wilderness Lodge Villas to be able to look at the object I'm talking about. Now, this particular thing is housed here in the Carolwood and Pacific room, and the fact that it's called that should be a clue as to what it might be. So let's take a walk inside. Yes, indeed, Walt's original trains were donated by Diane Disney to the Walt Disney Company to put on display here at the Wilderness Lodge. These are two of the train cars that he actually used on the Carolwood and Pacific Railroad when he ran it around his garden.
Walt's love of trains was evident to anyone who experienced his miniature railroad or the full-size steam locomotives at Disneyland. But beyond giving Walt a favorite hobby, trains gave him the chance to encounter like-minded visionaries who would change entertainment history.
Trains were important to Walt throughout his entire life. Trains were a lifeline to rural communities like Marceline, Missouri, where Walt grew up. They provided a sense of adventure and escape. It's not surprising that when Walt was a teenager, he would end up working for a railroad. He worked as a news butch, a vendor that sold cigarettes and candy and newspapers on commuter cars. The engine crew taught Walt how to operate steam locomotives, and that was a skill that would pay dividends throughout Walt's life. If we fast forward into the late 40s, the pressures of running the Walt Disney Studio were starting to wear on Walt, and he needed some kind of a hobby to take his mind off his activities. He had reconnected with trains through a couple of his key animators, Ward Kimball and Ollie Johnston, both of whom had both small-scale and, in Ward's case, large-scale railroads at their homes. Walt decided to build himself his own miniature railroad, which combined his interest in trains as well as his love of miniatures.
He started learning how to machine and how to do woodworking here at the studio. Roger Brogy, Disney legend and the head machinist here at the studio, kind of trained him.
Walt wanted to actually physically make the parts, and he didn't know how to run a lathe or a mill, and so my grandfather would Walt would go in the shop, and he would set him up on a machine and show him how to make the parts. And Walt would go in there and physically do it. From what my dad and my grandfather would tell me, he was really good at it. You just show him how to do it and get out of his way.
He selected a 5-acre parcel on Carolwood Drive in the Holmby Hills section of Los Angeles. He decided to name his locomotive Lily Bell after his wife Lillian, who was probably one of the most understanding wives in history. Walt ran the Carolwood Pacific for about 4 years, from 1950 to about 1954. It was wildly popular. It's important to note that when Disneyland opened, the railroad was not the property of Disneyland Incorporated. It actually belonged to Walt Disney personally. Engine number 1, the C.K. Holiday at Disneyland, and the engine number 2, the E.P. Ripley, are both based on the patterns for the Lily Bell, Walt's miniature locomotive. They're simply scaled up. There's no question that Ward Kimball heavily influenced Walt's railroad passion. Ward participated in the design of some of the key elements of the railroad, picking out the colors and such.
In 1949, Walt and his wife Lily moved their family to a new home on Carolwood Drive in the Holmby Hills. Walt used the opportunity to try his hand at a little backyard railroading. He called his railroad the Carolwood Pacific. The project quickly grew to almost a half-mile in length and included a 46-foot bridge and a 90-foot tunnel dug beneath Lily's prize flower patch. The layout was controlled from this barn, which also gave Walt a place to do a little daydreaming. On weekends, Walt loved to take his daughters and guests on trips around the yard. He loved it so much, he decided to expand on it a little. Today at Disneyland and Disney theme parks around the world, guests share in Walt's passion for trains every time they climb aboard and take a trip around the Magic Kingdom.